Hi all, welcome. My name is Janeen. I'm a UX UI designer from Retro Rabbit. Today I'll be doing prototyping and the different types of prototyping, as well as how we use it in the industry. First off, a definition of prototyping. It is a draft version to explore ideas for features or overall design concepts. Why is it needed? It's an expression of design intent so that you can see so that people can see and interact with it and see if they can understand it. A demonstration purposes for the client. So many times the client doesn't always see the bigger picture or the full context. So this way you can, by using prototypes, you can show that to the client. Show context to developers. By giving developers prototypes, they can see where screens lead to and what buttons, where certain buttons go. That way, they don't have to come and bother you to find out where each interaction goes. And then lastly, user testing, because you don't have the opportunity always to test on a live product, and you would like to have issues around usability sorted out before you release it on a public space like the App Store. Why is it important? So firstly, to ensure that design concepts work as intended. This is with user testing, making sure that the people that wants to use it as you would expect them to use it. With that, you determine if people are able to use a product. Do they understand the product? It also helps us to understand what people want. So you can find out what information and what actions is more important for the user and bring that forward in your designs. Then the user is important, but also the client is just as important, since they are paying you to do your job. The client, for them, what's most important is that they want a product to solve a certain issue, and they want it to be successful, and they have certain tick boxes that they want checked. So showing a prototype to a client helps client communication, because that way the client can clearly see whether you have included all of the information that you needed to, that he wants, and he can also see if the concepts are implemented correctly, especially when there's rigid rules around a certain product. It will have to, you have to keep it in mind on how it's implemented. So here is just an example of a miscommunication. This comic strip is quite popular in the UX world. So prototypes help to eliminate all of the miscommunications from how the customer or client explained it to you and what he actually needed. So showing prototypes to the client and to the developers and to every part of the team, you can easily eliminate a lot of these communication issues. So here's the first type of prototyping. It's low fidelity prototyping. It's usually paper prototyping. It's a quick and easy way to translate high-level designs into concepts and testable artifacts, so that you can very quickly draw something on a piece of paper. to convey an idea instead of doing a full, complete design with all of the visuals and UI included. So some of the visual attributes of a product is presented. For example, if you want to have a text field, it will, in your paper prototype, it will sort of look like a text field as a representation. So some pros and cons of paper prototyping is, so pros is you get feedback in the early stages. So paper prototyping you usually do within the first week or so after you received a project. This way you can also do, get the team together. It's very good to have collaborate with the entire team, all of the different sections, the client, the developers, everyone that is involved in completing this project, which allows for real-time iteration. So usually how we do it, like low fidelity prototyping is we'd sketch out on whiteboards and we'd all stand around the whiteboard, the entire team, and everyone will raise issues, what they're like, what their worries, dislikes, etc. Which getting the feedback helps a lot, especially from the developers, because instead of doing a complete full design of a feature and the developer comes to you, it's like, listen, this is going to take way too long, it's too complex, we don't have the data, whatever the reason may be. And things like this, you can already work out and find out in the early stages from the project that you're on. So cons, people tend to forget it's a prototype. The clients tend to think way ahead and they're like, but I don't like how this looks. I don't like how that section feels like. And it's important to remind the people that it's not a final product. It's not about the visuals. It's about the information that's presented to you on that stage. There tends, if you use low fidelity prototyping in user testing, there is some uncertainty during testing. Since it's something that you draw out, people don't necessarily recognize the components and areas that you drew. So there is some uncertainty and misconceptions of the prototype. And another issue is, especially during now everyone working from home, is getting everyone in the same room. Since you are doing a paper prototype and drawing on a board or on a big piece of paper, getting everyone in the same room is quite difficult. So here's some examples. So this is some examples from user testing. That's kind of like the ideal, what you would like to do. But in the industry, we don't always have the time to have such detailed paper prototyping and doing user testing like that, since there's usually not a lot of time. So in the industry, we usually use paper prototyping as planning, and that way we collaborate with the clients, designers, and developers. We don't really use it for prototyping or user testing because of the time constraints and also a lot of uncertainty from the users that we test on. So in the industry, it can be from super vague to super detailed. So here's some examples. So these are some examples of very vague prototyping, just planning things out, just some general ideas on what we kind of think we wanted to do. And then we can go to very detailed paper prototyping, where it's a lot of the information is already filled in, and how it will work in the actual, how it very close to what it would represent when we do the actual design. And then we go to high fidelity prototyping. So high fidelity prototyping is a prototype. It's as close as the actual product, but it's still not a product. It can be used through a prototyping tool like InVision, or a coded prototype where a dev built it. So some pros and cons. So the pros is you can share these prototypes digitally, which is easily distributed amongst everyone, especially if you're not sitting in the same room. Elements in the UI can already be tested, so you can test if a button looks like a button, if people understand the UI elements as you intended to be. You tend to get a lot more meaningful feedback since it is very close to the actual product. People can give more meaningful feedback and many times look past the UI because you already have it. And people tend to understand the concepts better since it's so close to the actual product and you're using actual UI components that will be in your final product. So cons, people can think it's a final product, especially many clients aren't always as up to scratch with the latest technologies and prototyping tools and what we kind of use in the design community. And they tend to like, but why isn't this button working? And you have to remind them that it's not the final product, it's just a prototype. It will not work like the final product, even though it is very close to it. It becomes more difficult to iterate since you have to update the actual UI components and the UI elements that you're using. It becomes more difficult, more time consuming, and hence it costs a lot more to do it. So in the industry, we use design prototypes for clients, to share with clients, designers, developers. We use prototypes for user testing. Developers also use the prototypes as a base to implement the actual product, the final product. And we also convince when clients, many clients don't always see the value of user testing. And with these prototypes, we use it as a tool to convince clients to spend time on user testing so that we can get that feedback. So coded prototypes, we mostly use it for proof of concepts. It's a good way to get new clients, to show them what you can do, the capabilities of what is available on the platform. You test out new technologies, test out some crazy ideas. So the crazy idea usually comes from a designer. We tend to like think big, and sometimes like the devs are like, maybe it's possible, maybe not, they're gonna have to taste it. So then they quickly do a coded prototype with that so that it doesn't influence the actual product they're working on, but they can still try it and see if it works. So these you usually have like a week or two to do, and the more experienced developers do these proof of concepts and testing the crazy ideas, since it's usually because you only have a week or two, you have to be able to work fast and understand your platform that you are working on. So some examples, so here's prototypes from the industry, And on the mobile screen, you can see the blue sections here from the screenshot is the actual interactive area where people can tap on. And then when you start working, like this is an example of a prototype. So this screenshot is from Sketch working with the plugin Craft and InVision. So this is kind of what your prototype will start looking like, with lots of details. But it can also be very basic like this, where you just want to show a small interaction section of a certain flow. And then you get clients that wants everything to be interactable, like it is the actual product that the devs develop. And then you get this. So this doesn't happen a lot, that you have to do such an intense prototype for a client. It is like just a few clients that want to have it like this. And then what we also use in the industry is medium fidelity prototyping, which is kind of in the middle. It's a digital prototype, but it's not a complete design. It's usually in a grayscale, but it can be used with a prototyping tool or a coded prototype. So the pros is you can share the prototypes digitally. It's more realistic and interactive than the paper prototyping since it is digital. And similar elements are used that you use can be reused in the final designs. So you kind of have the UI already going in the medium fidelity prototyping. Cons, once again, people tend to forget it's a prototype. They become, they tend to once again see into the grayscale and not at the information that you want to display. It's also more difficult to iterate since it is a digital prototype. You still have to go and change it in the software and update it and let the client know. It's not as collaborative as the paper prototyping, since it's not necessary that you have everyone together to collaborate. And then people tend to not see beyond the grayscale, which comes in that they want to see the actual visual from the high fidelity prototypes. So here's some examples. So you'll see like there's all of the information is there, but like the images and the logos and things like that is left out. So you can only see the main information that you would like to display there. In the industry, we share it with clients, designers, and developers. This is also, we use the medium fidelity prototypes when we don't have a brand identity yet. For example, a startup that they want to start with the product and the development, but they don't have their logo finalized, they don't have a color theme yet or anything like that. It's also for client proposals, which will go for like new clients if you want to show them ideas on what they want for their product. Developers can also start working from the wireframes when there's tight deadlines. And we usually use this for in-house user testing, meaning your colleagues, the client. So it's not really, you don't really show it to people outside of the team. So here's some examples is from the more detailed one over here to this one, which is less detailed, but we would want to show the concepts and the ideas through that we want to show, want to display on that screen, without getting all of the UI elements and where certain things are positioned, like the buttons, or like down here where you see the little buttons here, which might not even be buttons. It was just to represent that that section will be going somewhere. It will be interactive. So environment and context. So you always need to think about the context when creating a prototype. Where will this product be used? Who will use it? You might get a project that is out of the ordinary, but also, for example, on phones you have the touch areas. So you'll put the most important things or touchable things in the lower area where it falls in the natural space. And then, for example, info stand mall. So some things that you need to consider, like the placement of the interactive areas. Who's going to use it? Because these are quite tall. What if a disabled person in a wheelchair needs to use it? They won't be able to get at the top of the screen. Or children, they tend to want to always touch the touchscreen when they're in the mall with their parents. So you also have to think about the readability. Will someone be able to read a small font on these big screens? There might be cues. What type of people will use it? So what we did is have those big papers, get a big paper that is about the size of what the touchscreen is, and you place it about the height where the screen will be. And that way you can test it with people and see where they can reach, what will be comfortable for them. Another example would be something like an in-car children's app. So the placement of the interactive areas, the size of the interactive areas, cars aren't very stable when they're driving. So just a video on how this will work, or how you can test it, just waiting for it to load. So there you have it. So just some tools on what we use in the industry. So for design, there is a lot of tools that exist. There's Affinity, which is kind of like an Illustrator type of thing. Adobe Illustrator, Adobe XD, Figma, Sketch. Mostly we've been using Sketch and Figma. So Sketch is only available on Mac. It is ideal for interface design. It's integrated with InVision, which is a prototyping tool, and it also has a built-in prototyping tool. Figma is it's similar to Sketch. It's also ideal for interface design. It is browser-based, so it is very collaborative. You can collaborate with a lot of people. You do get an app that you can also work on. And the nice thing about Figma is that it's not just for Mac, it's available. If you have a browser, you can access it. And for Figma, you have a built-in prototyping tool, and then you have a built-in inspect mode for devs. So the inspect mode is for the devs. It shows them exactly what colors is used. It shows the sizes of the buttons, the icons, the fonts, etc. And there's also snippets of code for the devs in their specific language, which they code, not everything, but there's the CSS for web, and they have the iOS and Android versions as well. So for prototyping, there's also a lot of prototyping tools that exist. Adobe XD, Framer, Figma, Sketch, Axure, InVision. So we also use InVision with Sketch. The reason why we use the InVision with Sketch instead of using sketches built in prototyping is purely because of the inspect mode for developers. You use InVision in Sketch with a plugin, and then you build your prototypes in Sketch using this plugin, and then you upload it to InVision. And that is everything. Thank you.